On va pas manquer, aïe bobo. En effet, c'est bon qu'il aille, allez bailler. On va pas manquer. En effet, c'est bon.
So why would Toussaint Louverture rise up in the name of the king? For it was a smart move if you could think about it. For in lieu of starting a rebellion in his name, he started it on behalf of the dethroned king, because that is an authority people revere, respect, and they thought they had the full weight of the king's army behind them, so people were more willing to risk their life. If they think they are fighting on behalf of a powerful state, the authorities, then fight for somebody that is not unknown, a former freed slave called Toussaint. So again, I have to say this was a genius move. So at the start of the revolution, there was Toussaint, Georges Biot, Dury Boukman, Jean-François Pillot, and etc. It was an eclectic group that came from all different backgrounds, like a devout Catholic like Toussaint, and devout voodoo practitioner like Dury Boukman. One rebel leader actually used to go into battle with a big white rooster, whom he said gave him contact with God, and he was decorated with all sorts of medallion. So it was crazy times indeed. And they found an unlikely island in the Spanish colony of Santo Domingo, which was on the other side of the island, controlled by the Spanish. So here we have black men who rebelled and killed the plantation owners and slave drivers, fighting for the Spanish, who still owned slaves, against what was now a new French Republic. Toussaint and the other black rebels were made commanders in the Spanish army for their fighting prowess, winning battles after battles against the French. But from all the commanders, Toussaint stood out. For one, he could read, and number two, for his magnanimity. For when Georges Biot was about to execute white prisoners, Toussaint intervened on their behalf, saving their lives. And he even took multiple fortresses by talking his way, without firing a single shot. He convinced the enemy to join his side. The breakup came with his former comrades and the Spanish crown, as egos came to clash within the black commanders. In one funny instance, a black rebel commander wrote a letter denigrating Toussaint and telling Georges Biot not to trust him. Funny enough, since George couldn't read, he gave the letter to Toussaint to read. As things came ahead, Toussaint's family got arrested by the Spanish on behalf of his fellow comrades. And we all know that the love of his family is paramount, and so he couldn't stay with the Spanish any longer. So the imprisonment of his wife and children, albeit for a little while, and the abolishment of slavery in French colonies by Léger Félicité Santonax made Toussaint switch side. For like I said before, that era in France was chaotic time but also revolutionary. People were open and free thinking, and were not afraid to push new boundaries, with groups like Amis des Noirs, Friends of the Blacks. They saw no problem why there shouldn't be fraternité between blacks and whites, and so it happened that in the colonies, French republics abolished slavery in Saint-Domingue. Now, Toussaint Louverture and other rebels in 1971 didn't rise up with grand ideals. No, they were not intellectual university students like the ones that did the French Revolution. However, they had the innate feeling to be recognized as a human being and to fight for it. And what he didn't know, Toussaint made sure to learn quick, whether it was military tactics, republican idealism, and etc., which transformed him into a charismatic leader. That took many territories from his former comrades and the Spanish finally defeating them, and having them exiled outside of Saint-Domingue. Toussaint, general of the French Republic of Saint-Domingue now, could turn his forces to the British, who used the chaos in France to attack his colonies. And in this war, we also see the kind of quality Toussaint had as a general, the kind of honor he had. When he and his troop overran an enemy camp and saw a group of starving white women and children, he took them under his protection and gave them food and clothing. When the British massacred his men in mass execution, he on the other hand wasn't so cruel. He sent them back, 6 soldiers of the Irish Legion and their captain, and rebuked the British officer. Even though I'm just a black man, and even though I have not received a polished education as you and your officers, I would feel that such a dishonorable acts were they committed by my own forces would tarnish my reputation and my nation's glory. So after Toussaint finally defeated the British and kicked them out of Haiti, one would assume the man that exemplified the words, "I was born a slave, but nature gave me a free soul," would not get internal strife, especially from other black people. But one would be wrong. For as much as a magnanimous and magnificent moment in history is the Haitian Revolution, it was also a ridiculous one as well. For after they achieved their freedom in Saint-Domingue, there was a war between light-skinned black people and dark-skinned black people. I shit you not. It's ridiculous, isn't it? But Toussaint had to face 2 rebellions by mixed-race officers, the most significant one being of André Rigaud. Now, André Rigaud was a mulatto that felt humiliated serving under Toussaint, who was 100% black, since he believed in the caste system that put whites on top, then mulattoes, then the pure blacks, then the slaves at the bottom. So he wanted to team up with the whites to put dark-skinned people in their place. Which is funny because mulattoes also complain of not getting equal rights as citizens. All I gotta say is, listen niggas, y'all are black. Mixed or not, black or brown, in the eyes of the white man, especially in those times, y'all are niggas. And in these times we also see that Toussaint made a grave sin against black people in Jamaica. for since he was making lucrative deals with the British government, he warned him of a plot by the French government in Saint-Domingue, by his friend Rome, who sent an Asian provocateur, Isaac Portas, a Sephardi Jew, who went to Jamaica to start a slave rebellion and free the people from oppression. But Toussaint damned him and Jamaica, as he was arrested as soon as he landed on the island and then executed. A favor to his British business partners for sure. One they neglected to pay when he was having the war of knives between him and the mulatto general André Rigaud. They seized his ships at sea and feigned ignorance. They also refused to sell him weapons at a crucial time. To which Toussaint said, "Long ago they did not cease telling me that the English were deceivers. Their promises, their words, were never to be depended upon." To which I 100% agree with Toussaint, and I will add USA and France to that list as well, for any revolutionary group or freedom fighters to trust, for sooner or later they'll stab you in the back. So after crushing André Rigaud's rebellion, Toussaint set his eyes on Santo Domingo and conquered the Spanish colony. So Toussaint and his cadre of men, which mostly included family members and future rulers of Haiti like Jean-Jacques Dessalines, were still subject to the French Empire and didn't rule unopposed. But nevertheless, it was a sight to see in the time of Atlantic slave trade. Black men wearing well-decorated French military uniforms and feathers in the hats standing equal to English and American diplomats. What was even stranger, the owners of the old plantation Toussaint was born into, the Breda family, was writing to him, their former slaves, to take pity on them with their financial woes in Haiti. Like I said before, Toussaint was magnanimous. He even helped out his old slave master Bayon, the one who freed him, since he had fallen on hard times. So we see in Toussaint Saint-Domingue a truly multiracial island that tried to build a bridge between the races. For Toussaint didn't completely uproot the white society from the government. No, for he needed them since they had skills that were vital to run the government. So it was an eclectic sort of government with black, white, and multiracial men trying to make things work. Now don't get me wrong, in modern day eyes, Toussaint was a dictator. For one, he still kept black people working in the plantation. They weren't slaves anymore, they were getting paid. But if they decided to run away, his men would whip them all the same. Moreover, he banned gambling, prostitution, voodoo, dancing after certain hours. Basically, he was Captain Buzzkill and ran the whole island like he was running his military men. So was it perfect? No. But it was a successful multiracial country that also abolished slavery. So a real jewel of that time. But all that ended when Napoleon sent General Charles Leclerc, his brother-in-law, to kill all the black leadership in Haiti and reconstitute slavery in Haiti, even though Toussaint was his loyal subject. So as much as Toussaint tried to be seen as a fellow Frenchman, a fellow commander, a fellow human being, Napoleon saw him and the black population of Haiti as nothing. Like most Europeans, he had racist views of blacks, that they were lazy, cowards, who don't know how to fight, and etc. And him rising to be a great conqueror in Europe and at the cusp of an empire, the first consul that was too big at that time, that he didn't reply to any of the letters Toussaint sent him, and thought it would be easy to take over the island from the black population. He would be mistaken, for it was a brutal war, a guerrilla war with no quarters given and none taken, even more so than Napoleon's war in Spain, as he called it the Spanish Ulcer. Since General Leclerc and his soldiers didn't really see black folks as equal human beings, and there was much animosity towards them as well. There are many examples of the savagery that occurred in that war on both sides, as villages were razed, black prisoners drowned en masse or suffocated to death, or as Toussaint and his men gouged out the eyes of Frenchmen with corkscrews, just to name a few of the atrocities that occurred. It was a bloody war indeed. Leclerc even wrote to Napoleon that we should exterminate all those mountain Negroes and leave nothing but the women and children. But try as he might, he couldn't do that, and broke a truce with Toussaint, but reneged on it, and kidnapped Toussaint and sent him to prison in France. There, separated from his friends, family, and country, the man who fought so hard for his freedom and his people died alone in the cold, dark dungeons of the mountain of Jura. As many times as he wrote to Napoleon for leniency, for clemency, Napoleon never read any of them and buried him with his indifference. It wasn't until he also lost and got exiled that he remembered Toussaint and said he made a mistake and how he dealt with him and Haiti. When his fate matched Toussaint, both great generals who came from nothing and obscurity, from an island as well, and both rose to meteoric heights to fall so low and die alone in prison. One was white and one was black, but did it really matter? For I am sure that Napoleon felt as the man he locked away, as he lived out the rest of his life in that small island of St. Helena, shunned and rejected. As for Haiti, she prevailed as mosquito season came in and disease ravaged the French troops. Jean-Jacques Dessalines took up the mantle as rebel leader with ruthless vengeance. After all was said and done, 8,000 French soldiers went home, leaving behind 20 generals, 30,000 soldiers, and 350,000 Haitians on both races dead, with all the white population now massacred. Independent Haiti rose, but with high costs and ethnic cleansing. Jean-Jacques Dessalines only spared the Polish troops, who switched sides and fought with the Haitians. Since the Poles didn't like the French conquerors either, so they empathized with the Haitian struggle, becoming a fabric of Haiti, and using the Black Madonna of Czestochowa as an icon of friendship between the Polish and the Haitians, still used today as a mixture between Catholicism and Voodooism. So it is this massacre that people always want to point out when they try to denigrate the Haitian Revolution. Now, do I support ethnic cleansing of white people in Haiti? No, I don't. But I also know after all those years of slavery, torture, black people had enough. And after all the goodwill that Toussaint gave them before, who was there now to forgive and forget when people were calling kill all the whites? Who was there now to feed the disheveled white women and children? He was in prison now and was soon to be dead. So even after all the magnanimity Toussaint showed them, they still wanted to put black people back in chains. So I personally would just exile the whites from Haiti, but still view the Haitian Revolution as a glorious one. For me, it's the same as the Allies winning against the Nazis with the Dresden bombings and all the rapes that happened after that. So do I support the bombing of Dresden, the killing of civilians, or the raping of women and children? No, I don't. But I support the war to defeat Nazism. Not every cruel action committed by the US Army or the Soviet Army. Same with the Haitian Revolution.